Hello and welcome. 1 year ago, a fire was lit in Bangladesh. A fire that started with a spark of student protest and grew into a revolutionary inferno, consuming a political dynasty that seemed untouchable. This was the July Revolution. It wasn't led by politicians or generals. It was led by students armed with smartphones and an unshakable sense of injustice. Today, we are going to take a deep, detailed dive into the entire story, the historical context, the day-by-day escalation, the brutal crackdown, and the final, unbelievable moments that led to the fall of a government and the dawn of a new era. To truly understand the why of this revolution, we must look back further than last year. Sheikh Hasina's Awami League had been in power for 15 consecutive years. While this period saw significant economic development and infrastructure projects, it also saw a steady erosion of democratic freedoms. Laws like the Digital Security Act were widely used to silence dissent, and accusations of forced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and a system of political patronage created a climate of fear and frustration. This was the pressurized environment into which the spark of the quota protest would fall. The issue of job quotas wasn't new, it was a recurring flashpoint. Major student protests had erupted in 2018, demanding reform to a system they saw as archaic and unfair. At that time, over half of all government jobs were reserved for various quotas, with 30% for descendants of 1971 freedom fighters, leaving little room for open merit. The 2018 protests were so massive that the government eventually relented and abolished most of the quota system. So, when the High Court reinstated it on June 5, 2024, it felt like a direct betrayal of a promise, a step backward for an entire generation. The reaction was immediate. Students from Dhaka University, John Jernigar University, and other institutions began organizing. This is the who at the heart of our story, the Boishommobirodhi Chhatro Andolon, or the Students Against Discrimination. Led by a group of determined coordinators, they became the central nervous system of the movement. They were digital natives, and their primary weapon, their how, was social media. They used Facebook Live to broadcast protests, Telegram for secure coordination, and created viral hashtags that galvanized support across the nation. In the early days of July, the protests remained largely peaceful rallies, human chains, and classroom boycotts. The students were clear about their initial demand, a return to the 2018 reforms. However, the government's stance was dismissive. This was tragically crystallized on July 14 in a speech by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. She controversially questioned the protesters' lineage, implying they were descendants of pro-Pakistan collaborators from the 1971 war. This deeply personal and inflammatory rhetoric was a point of no return. It transformed a policy dispute into a battle for dignity and respect. From that moment, the situation escalated dramatically. The pro-government student wing, the Bangladesh Chhatra League, was unleashed on university campuses. There were horrific reports of them attacking protesters with machetes, sticks, and chains, with a particular focus on terrorizing female students. This state-sanctioned violence was met with fierce resistance. The wear of the conflict spread from Dhaka to every corner of the country as the public, enraged by the attacks on their children, began to join the students on the streets in solidarity. The period between July 16 and July 25 was the deadliest. The government deployed the police, the elite Rapid Action Battalion, and the Border Guard Bangladesh with a clear mandate to crush the protests. They used live ammunition, rubber bullets, and massive amounts of tear gas. The death of Abu Syed, a student from a private university who was shot while defiantly standing his ground, became a martyr's image that fueled the revolution. The final death toll is estimated to be in the hundreds, with thousands more injured, turning campuses and streets into battlegrounds. In a desperate attempt to control the narrative and stop the mobilization, the government imposed a nationwide internet blackout on July 18. For days, Bangladesh was plunged into an information vacuum, cut off from the rest of the world. But this tactic backfired. It created more fear and anger, and the diaspora in countries around the world took to social media, becoming the international voice of the movement and pressuring their own governments to take notice. The state had lost control of the story. By now, the what of the movement had completely transformed. The initial demand for quota reform was a distant memory. A new, Unified slogan had emerged and was chanted by millions. Dofa ek, dabi ek, Sheikh Hasina podoteg, which means 1 point, 1 demand, Sheikh Hasina's resignation. This singular focus united every faction of the protest, from students and laborers to business owners. It was no longer a protest, it was a full-throated revolution aimed squarely at the head of the state. The final, checkmate move was the call for a nationwide non-cooperation movement, beginning August 3rd. This was the ultimate expression of the people's power. Civil servants walked out of their offices. Doctors and nurses only handled emergencies. Transportation workers parked their vehicles. The country's economic hubs, its ports and factories, fell silent. Bangladesh was completely paralyzed, not by government order, but by a collective act of public will. The government had state power, but the people had withdrawn their consent to be governed. Speculation was rampant about the military's role. Would they intervene to save the regime? The answer came on the evening of August 5th. The Chief of Army Staff, General Wakru addressed the nation. In a calm and measured tone, he announced that to avoid further bloodshed and respect the will of the people, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina had resigned and departed the country. That announcement was the official end of a 15-year era. The military had chosen to side with the people, sealing the revolution's success. The aftermath was a mixture of pure euphoria and unsettling chaos. Millions poured into the streets to celebrate. Protesters breached symbolic buildings like the Prime Minister's residence and the Parliament. However, this power vacuum also led to a wave of reprisal attacks on the homes and businesses of Awami League officials. Disturbingly, there were also coordinated attacks on minority Hindu communities, a tragic and recurring feature of political turmoil in the nation's history, highlighting the deep societal fissures the revolution had also exposed. In the days that followed, the student leaders, who had guided the revolution, stepped forward to propose a path forward. At their suggestion, Nobel Peace Prize laureate Dr. Muhammad Yunus was named the head of a new interim government. This move, while popular, raised complex constitutional questions. The new administration was sworn in with a clear mandate to restore stability, undertake deep institutional reforms, investigate the violence, and ultimately, hold free and fair elections to return the country to a durable democracy. Now, 1 year later, Bangladesh is still navigating the consequences of those incredible weeks. The interim government faces immense challenges, stabilizing an economy rocked by the turmoil, holding powerful figures accountable, and fostering a new political culture. The legacy of the July Revolution is still being written, but it serves as an undeniable and powerful testament to the fact that when united, a generation can indeed bend the arc of history. It was a revolution for dignity, for merit, and for the soul of a nation. Thank you for joining this in-depth exploration of the 2024 July Revolution. The story is a vital reminder that history is not just something that happens. It is something that is made, often by the most unexpected people.